Welcome back to Chewing It Over. I'm Jack Chew. Your daily, weekdays we go daily at 12:30 till 1 o'clock on your lunch break to sort of discuss whatever's topical at the time, usually MSK and education and all things in that space, but often current affairs or whatever's emerging that we think is topical and interesting. It's going fairly well at the moment. We stream across various different channels. Wherever you're tuning in, thanks for joining. I'm always paranoid in the first couple of minutes that it's not working, that I've not took a phone on, etc. So always massive thanks to whoever sends the first comment wherever it is you find us. So please do let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. And probably about 100 episodes in, I'll feel more comfortable and not always have to do this. But that's my usual opening gambit. I've been joined today by Adam Meakins. If you've not heard of Adam Meakins, where have you been? You've been under a rock. He's Marmite to many, but a good friend of mine. And one that I'm willing to, I still at this point, admit to being a good friend of mine. He's someone that's been on various platforms of Physio Matters. We did the millionth download episode with him in his home pub and stuff, and we sort of chewed it over there for at length. And so we're well versed in having back and forth both publicly and privately. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk to him about recently, he has many a time, he likes to frame things, and I call it a rant because he called it a rant, is that he wanted to go off on one about marketing consultants and sort of talking a bit about the coaches and stuff that he's probably like me, he probably gets the target marketing from them, and so it's that side of things that I think is interesting because I've noticed them, and what I might roll my eyes at, he rants at, and I love that because fundamentally it could well be that there's actually a lot of agreement there, but for some reason I've decided not to go at it. So it'll be interesting. But there also might be some distinctions between our positions that are worth talking through as well. So neither me or Adam are ones for just nodding along and waving each other's ideas through if we do disagree. So let's chew it over and discuss it. And hopefully he's backstage. Hopefully I can just bring him in from the lobby and we can have a chat about it. So let's see. Adam, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, pal. How you doing, buddy?
Brilliant. Not so bad. It's not brought you up on my screen for some reason, but hopefully we should get you side by side. I don't know why it's not. There we go. Is that working?
Go. Yeah, I've got you now.
Nice.
You're to the left of me, mate. You're not my right hand man. You're my left hand man.
Nice one. Right. Well, let me make sure this is all working. It looks like my signal's a little bit glitchy, so if I go off there, you've got to just wing it, right? You just got to go off on one and try not to burn the whole place down.
Well, I'm very impressed that you're doing this every lunchtime, mate. Is this your new diet routine that you've decided to do to try and get rid of your dad bod? Instead of having slim fast, you're doing talk fast. You just sacrifice your lunch hour or lunch half hour during patients in clinic just to talk shit online for a bit. Is that your new idea?
It's working. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, I don't have time for lunch and therefore I can't keep eating. So yeah, but yeah, I am starting to. My big thing that I turned a corner on the other week, about 6 weeks ago, it was a threshold where I'd stopped getting fatter. So just plateauing was a massive celebration. So
you hit critical mass.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, just topped out on what I can do with this frame. Yes, well, thanks for that. Yeah, but no, it's working quite well actually, and it just gives me a point. I think what weirdly it tidies things up. So I don't know if you'd agree with this, but sometimes you get sucked in, especially when you've got a bit of a following or there's an expectation or people even criticize you for not having passed comment on a certain thing. It was quite useful for me to be able to, instead of getting into the weeds on various different platforms, I could say, that's interesting, I'll talk about that tomorrow. Or would you like to come on the show to discuss that tomorrow? And it actually tidies things up. So I'm trying to contain in half an hour what was otherwise bleeding into other parts of my diary, which I just couldn't afford that sort of inefficiency. So weirdly, doing it on a regular is actually helpful. But we can get into stuff like this that otherwise me and you might have passed a few texts about or got into on Twitter. This seems like a more appropriate forum. What is it you were ranting about specifically?
Yeah, well, just as you said, mate, it's these targeted ads, the old algorithms that go around on social media that, I don't know how it does it because I don't click on these links, but, I just start to get more and more of these targeted campaigns of certain marketing coaches, healthcare, physio. They brand themselves as physio, healthcare marketing specialists. And there's these ads that pop up with some guy, normally with a speech impediment, who claims to be able to, maximize incomes and profits for physiotherapy private practices. And I just find the way that they go about it and the way that they talk about it and the way that they come across in these ads just makes my skin crawl. It just absolutely makes my teeth fur up and I just want to pull something out and scream at something, because I'm like, this is not how to advertise healthcare. It's this. I find this merging of a service industry and a healthcare profession, and it just, I think some of these individuals are just going about it the wrong way. And as I said in my post when I had this rant, I do think there is a need for physiotherapists to be able to market themselves and advertise themselves. Absolutely. And I do think a lot of physios and a lot of healthcare professionals need some assistance and help in that, to find and navigate an ethical, moral way of being able to promote what they do to the general public, to help gain patients that they then can treat in a sensible, rational, ethical way. So I don't think, I'm ranting against marketing or advertising in healthcare at all. That's not what I'm saying. It's just the way that some of these marketing gurus and professionals and coaches, or whatever you want to call them, go about it. When they start talking about patient retention, it's an evil word in my opinion. I think that word in healthcare, retention, retaining patients, it's evil. It's just, there's absolutely no excuse to use that word in any sentence in healthcare at all. I need to retain you. You're my patient now.
Yeah, selling. You're associating that with selling sickness, as often I describe it, whereby someone's inferring a need and creating some sort of low-level dependency to that service or person or product. I've got some questions coming in which we will definitely visit. For example, Philippa on LinkedIn has tuned in saying, how do you recommend we do it? And I think that's something we definitely want to come to. So I want to make sure that we visit that and visit some of those comments and questions. But because it typically distracts me, not in a good way, I'm going to just hide the comments from me for a second and we're going to get stuck in. But I just want to say that we will try and visit some of that, because I think it's important, and I don't think either of us would be averse to that side of it. It's not as if we're just dragging something down and saying that there's no place for it. It sounds like you're actually carving out a space for what you think is marketing and promotion, but it's just you're considering a lot of what you're seeing to be unethical. Now let's zoom in on that retention thing then. Is it that I can understand the word retention would still apply to a patient that returns to me 2 years later with a different type of injury that they've picked up on a rugby pitch. But it would also be that then you're rightly, I think, associating retention to being that to keep someone on your books within an episode of care, or for them to be sort of maintained or managed longer term. And that is a relevant distinction there. Are you frustrated by both kinds of that, or is it just the latter?
No, it's just the latter, mate. So I've got absolutely no problem with, building up a relationship with an individual who you've seen for an episode of care, who wants to return to you because they've had a very good experience of your management and treatment of that particular episode. What I am ranting against is when they are maximizing retention per episode. And that's what I see in these adverts, is these individuals are saying, when you have somebody walking in, how can you maximize that person's current situation to get the most out of it? And that just absolutely, as I say, winds me up and makes my teeth itch. So no, I've got no problems with retention from a point of view. You've done something really well with an individual. They've gone away for X amount of time and they want to return to you because of a successful experience before. It's when you're seeing somebody for one episode of care and you are squeezing and crushing and rinsing as much as you can out of that individual to maximize your profits as a healthcare professional. That's the bit that I really hate, and that's the retention that I don't like.
What I've seen as well is, there's nothing there that I want to push back on at all. It's a massive bugbear of mine, and one of the reasons why I thought it would be smart for us to discuss it. I suppose one of the things that I hear, if I tried to sort of steel man their argument and make it as strong as I can, is that they often, especially if they're not associated to the industry necessarily, they just work within it as a consultant, so they're not a health professional that's then learned in that direction. They're often saying, look, I'm not here to tell you as to how to treat them. It's just I hear from my clients that they have so much to give the population, and that if they know of a shoe that patient should be wearing, then why are you not selling them that shoe? Now, inherent to that, which is what's interesting, is that it's because of the presuppositions that have occurred whereby they're assuming that there are products, gadgets, gizmos, that there is, why are you not seeing them twice a week? You've got so much you could give. It's that there's an underlying assumption of the style of care that seems to, if you don't get that right, like if we can't educate them on an appropriate rehab-centric, self-efficacy model of care, I can so understand why downstream of, if that isn't there, then downstream of it, if you associate yourself as being, if the patient sees me daily, if they're willing to pay for it, or if they want these gadgets and gizmos, there's no problem.
Yeah, no, but the point is you decide how often to see a patient based on your clinical reasoning, not based on some artificial marketing guru's idea of what they think is optimal optimization or utilization. So, there are some patients that I would recommend seeing 2 or 3 times a week for an extended period of time, because their situation, their current environment, their lack of support from other areas demand and clinically reason for you that this person needs to come in 2, 3 times a week and be seen for 6, 12 weeks to get going, to help them through this current situation, to have lots of discussion and education over some sticky beliefs, to try and help create some behavioral change. Then absolutely, you are looking to maximize your treatment with that individual, and you are probably going to front load a lot of that at the beginning. But that's based on your clinical reason. It's not based on some shitty financial marketing figure that some guru's made. But then conversely, there are some individuals who come in that just need one appointment. They just need a bit of advice and education. They just need a bit of reassurance. They just need some clarification around something they're not sure about. Job done. So when they say to me, and I've been in clinics like this, they say to me, every patient you've got to see 6.73 times. They give you this artificial sales figure. And I'm like, that doesn't work, because there are some patients where I have to see 30, 40, 50 times, or I think I need to see them 30, 40, 50 times. And then there's patients that I just need to see once. So if I start assuming that everybody's going to be seen the same, I'm not working as a healthcare professional, because I'm not clinically reasoning. I'm treating everybody with the same brush, and that's not how patients present.
So let's talk
again,
about
I think it needs reasoning.
So the clinical, absolutely right, and massive champion of clinical reasoning and critical reasoning, as I've talked to you about before, where you're making sure you're putting a skeptical lens through it. And I think what I want to know here is that the sleight of hand that I see happen is that because they're saying that they're informing their clinical reasoning with some models of care and styles of care and assumptions of the evidence or what have you, that's what presupposes it. So there are some that are putting it through a sales filter, and they're recognizing that, right, how can this episode of care maximize profit? Granted, but I think I personally feel there's a larger section that part of what is informing their clinical reasoning is a dated structural biomechanical model of care, which also infers that there's more direct influence we can have on, say, tissue characteristics, tissue healing, etc. That means that even that I speak to people that they've not even got the sales or the numbers in mind. They just feel that, well, when I'm seeing someone, regardless of what it's for, and I see that they're overpronating, why on earth am I not cross-selling them an orthotic, right? They're not, and even then, they might say, even if it's not me that sells it them, I want to recommend it because that's what they need. Or that, why would I not see them later that week for some acupuncture for pain relief? Because they're suffering. It's that, I suppose, I'm not therefore buying them an excuse, but I'm just meaning that actually I think a lot of these issues are upstream of the sales. I think there's a lot of health professionals that aren't as unscrupulous as sometimes you describe.
No, I'm not casting aspersions on anybody doing this maliciously. You're right. And again, this word tends to upset a lot of people. There are a lot of ignorant clinicians out there who do things with best intentions at heart, that do think that, these biomechanical devices, gadgets and gimmicks genuinely do really help people and are worth the money and the costs and everything to the patient. But that's due to their ignorance. That's due to their lack of understanding. I don't think it's malicious. I just think it's ignorant. That's all. So I understand exactly what you're saying there, Jack, that there are some clinicians out there that do a lot of extra stuff that is not necessary or needed, and sell things to patients that are not necessary or needed. But that is, as I say, that's an ignorance issue. That's not a maliciousness issue, which is what I almost see these gurus, these marketing people are more malicious in the way that they're trying, because I think they genuinely know that they need to, maximize profits, and the way they do that is by looking for any option and avenue and treatment. And for me, as I say, trying to maliciously go out and rinse and squeeze things out of patients when you're probably thinking, I don't think this is doing much, I don't think this is necessary, I don't think this is really needed, but I'll still sell this foam roller at a 25% markup. That's the other thing that really pisses me off, is these cross sales that normally happen. Patients can go and find the things that they get sold to by another clinician at a cheaper price elsewhere. So there's always this markup as well. And that winds me up, but that's another issue. But yeah, I think again, there's the difference between, ignorance and genuinely thinking you are helping and doing the best versus malicious profiteering.
Yeah, I think, and I do agree. I think just make sure that we cover this off before we then get stuck into what is, what would we recommend and what is ethical sales in this space or marketing. But before we do that, I just want to see, what do you feel, have you got a way in which you can articulate what it is about this that would be fine in other areas or industries, but in healthcare is unethical? And so in instances whereby if someone walks into a shop and there are certain things there, or the whole process of someone, say, online shopping, that's designed to potentially tempt them into other things, I feel personally that that's certainly more ethical than it is in healthcare. But what is it about healthcare that you feel should be held to a different standard?
Because again, I think it's down to the vulnerability of your customer. And that's the other thing, is that our patients are not customers, they're not clients, they're patients. And that's the big difference, is that at the end of the day, this individual coming to see us is coming to see us because of a need. And that need then leads them to have some vulnerabilities, which means that we could take advantage of that. Now, in another service industry environment, they are a customer, they have a need, but that need is not an essential need. It's normally a nicety, it's a luxury, and therefore, there is room there to look to cross-sale and, market things and everything along those lines. But I think the biggest issue and the difference there is we're dealing not with customers, we're dealing with patients.
Yeah, I think one of the things, regardless of what corner of the industry you're in or what sector, is if your bosses or your boss's boss starts telling you to refer to people as service users, that they're dehumanizing their vulnerability, and you definitely need to be keeping an eye on that and recognizing the connotations that gives. So let's get stuck in then what we would recommend, because it's great, because this is a circumstance where people might want to argue that we would be being too nihilistic and saying, no, it's actually unethical to even market yourself or to self-promote in any which way. And I think that fundamentally, because of what you're describing being rotten in the industry, and I do agree, I think that it almost means that those that are creating ethical care models and that are personalizing and individualizing care in a really sensible, evidence-informed manner that really grapples with the challenges that we all face in industry, they need to make sure that they're competing with the unscrupulous, at least appropriately. And so if they were to be nihilistic and perceive that we're saying actually it's unethical to do any of that, that's going to be, unfortunately, fall away. So what are your sort of top tips as to what you think not only are appropriate, but also that feel like a really sensible way to push back?
Yes, it is a really tricky environment, especially currently now because of the noise, and it's really hard to be heard and to be seen because there's so much information available to people on so many different platforms. So yeah, I totally empathize with any ethical, rational healthcare clinician who is trying to be seen and heard, because they are promoting a sensible, honest way, a moral way of treating people. But, the shyster down the road who has a gazillion more followers because they post sexy stuff, with all the bells and whistles and gadgets and gimmicks around it, is getting more attention. So it's very tricky is the answer. And I don't think I've got any, real golden tips. All I can say is I think you have to be consistent with your message. You have to be honest and genuine in what you are trying to do, which is help people return back to function. And I think the biggest thing is use patient testimonials. Now, again, I've sort of changed my mind on this, because I used to think patient testimonials were really cheesy and horrible, and I thought 90, and I still probably do, I think 90% of them made up. But I do think, actually demonstrating to people with a little video clip of what you do with another patient with their consent, And you can get that individual then to, maybe come on camera and do a little sound bite that says, this problem that I've had for years, I saw Jack, and within 6 sessions, he was a miracle worker, and he got to it with no fuss, explained it really quickly and clearly. That sort of stuff, I think, is gold in the marketing industry for an ethical, rational healthcare clinician. So I think, your biggest advertisers are your patients. So I think there's a role there for trying to use them in the social media world. Yeah,
using that real world sort of word of mouth experience, but then putting that as the broadcast piece of content rather than sales.
And do what you do with all the sexy graphics as well, because that draws attention. I'm really impressed with your graphics, by the way, mate. I'm going to have to leave that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll send the check in the post. I'll clip that, you see, and use it as my social media content, shall I? No, I think that's something that I've come to realise. I was a bit of a Puritan early days, where especially when we were doing the long form stuff interprofessionally, it was just like, the conversations, especially it was fairly innovative in the space, whereby we were just sort of saying that the conversation is everything, and that essentially all the trimmings aren't really appropriate because it distracts from the core message. But realistically, it's something that, providing appropriate entertainment and to make it something that is as palatable, and to make sure that then you're using some of the dressing that the more scrupulous folk are using, but then actually, as long as the sort of meat is quality, and I think that is where we've ended up, is to appropriately dress things up, not as a means of clickbait or not as a means of trying to spin things, but also just to try and make sure that the good messages aren't necessarily drowned out. Evie's made a really good point about.
Before I ask Evie's question, can I just answer David Zalek's question that's just come up first? Because he's just asked how or why can you say patient testimonials are made up? Because normally when you see them are just written text. So somebody has said, Mrs. M, whoever that is, so it's an anonymous thing. It's on somebody's webpage. I've had a wonderful experience. Jack was the best thing ever. He's got hands like Jesus. And I'm like, that's just somebody's text that could simply be made up. So, and I think when I see these sort of testimonials, which are just written testimonials, that's my suspicion, critical rating going, is that really a testimonial, or is that somebody just made that up?
Yeah, well, it'd be fascinating. I mean, yeah, it'd be a bold claim that's unprovable if we were to say that most of them are, all of them are. But then similarly, it'd be what a weird world if people weren't tempted to. If you're going to have that, then why wouldn't you be? A patient sort of maybe said that about me once at a time, so I'll just give them a Mr. X or whatever. And so, fundamentally,
polishing around the edges. Yeah,
you'd have to have a really a fairly I don't know, a blinkered view of human nature if you think that people wouldn't be tempted to at least fudge the books a little bit in that direction. Whereas something a bit more verifiable, like you say, I mean, it's pretty time consuming. I remember, fortunately, we had an intern last summer called Amelia who still works on the physio matter side of things, but she came into the clinic and stuff, and she built this brilliant case study sort of testimonial piece video for one of our patients. And it's good because it was sort of the style of practice and the style of care came through in the story. It was clear that we hadn't and this is a lady that had been coming in fairly regularly. We'd worked with her over an extended period of time, who had very different beliefs when she left than when she came in. And fortunately, in many ways, I've not seen her since, because she's clearly doing well. Might be on a bed twice a week in manipulation, I don't know. But generally speaking, it seemed that she rehabilitated many parts of her life that she was happy with. But it took a lot of work to produce that content, not only as well to deliver that style of care and to not succumb to what she came in expecting the first time that she'd had before. So yeah, it's not without its challenge, but no, I do agree they can be really powerful things. There's some lovely comments coming in. I don't think we're going to be able to get to them all. One of the things that I noticed is that Philippa, who asked the question, how would you recommend we do it, which hopefully we've visited at least one answer to that. She also then followed up saying, chiropractors do it. That is an area in which chiros, and I think me and you probably have a similar opinion there, whereby I'd much rather someone saw a good chiro than a shit physio. But generally speaking, the chiro model of someone having a set of block sessions or having maintenance work in a structural way, or inferred that it's a structural change, they are some of the worst offenders, I would argue, in that direction.
Yeah, again, I don't want to be too profession-centric or abusive, but yeah, you're right. I think, chiros, unfortunately, I have probably more of this sort of way of practicing than other professions. But I have seen a few physio places do it as well, selling packages of care.
It came up a bit on Twitter, I think, the other day. That packages being it's because you'd mentioned the fact that there are circumstances you can think of whereby you might see someone a lot of plenty of sessions, but would you have? So when you mentioned that there's a patient that you might have seen 50 times, but would you have had them buy a block of 50?
No, because you don't. Although you've got that reason, it's a changeable situation, as you know. People's presentations, their prognoses, their outcomes are very flexible and changeable. So you don't actually know what's going to happen in 2-3 months. You can have a suspicion, but you don't actually know what's going to happen. So if you get somebody to sign up for those 2 to 3 months, and best outcome is they don't need it. I mean, I suppose if you have a refund policy, then it's okay. But, for me, I think it really needs to be on an ad hoc basis, based on your clinical reasoning.
Yeah, we've had a couple of comments that are not dissimilar, really, I've heard plenty of stories like this where competitions who can sell the most add-ons, bands and balls and rollers and things like that. So there'd be an internal oh, look at that.
Look, you went for the baby cuteness last time. I'm going to go for the cat cuteness this time. I'm going to go for the kitty.
I forgot. Yeah, well, that's because you stood me up. We were meant to do this on Tuesday, but then you stood me up until now. And I've heard a rumor it was because you had a meeting with your marketing coach. Is that why? Is that why you stood me up?
Yeah, you're not far from the truth there, mate. I had a meeting with a specialist.
Right. Okay. Evie's mentioned as well, not dissimilar to Matt's comment, that she worked in a private practice chain where she was told by the owner that the job was to keep patients coming back because new patients don't grow on trees. That's a bit of you must, like I do, hear about that quite a lot. I get a lot of people that sometimes come almost like a soft mentorship question, might come into a DM saying, how do this is my 4th private job that I've had whereby I'm expected to comply within a clinic's model of care that just doesn't seem to suit what I feel is ethical care. And they are massively challenged and conflicted because they still need to make a living. Yeah. Yet they are feeling like they, much like what Evie and Matt have said there, being expected or asked to do things that then just don't sit well with their personal ethics. Do you have a sort of top tip that you give to folk that come to you with that?
Yep, leave that place. I know it sounds a bit harsh and a bit blunt and a bit direct, but I've been in the same situation as well. I've worked in private practices that had that same approach and very much was, pushing me to, have utilization and retention figures. And basically I felt like a cheesy double glazing salesman rather than a healthcare professional. So I left. I didn't do it immediately. I didn't walk out the door and throw me rattle out the pram, but, I started actively looking for other employment elsewhere. And soon realised to say that there are other options out there. That's the beauty with the job we have. You're not anchored for 25 years into one position and one company.
Yeah, so, I think that the ones that, because I agree, and unfortunately,
because you're going to change them. As much as I'd say, on grand scheme, say, oh yeah, go and talk to the managers, go and talk to the company directors, and have a word and discuss it with them. They'll be like, it ain't gonna. If they've got that mentality and they've been in business 10, 15 years, there is absolutely no bloody way they're going to change it. So you're going to have to find somebody else that's got a different ethos.
Yeah, I do agree, and my advice isn't dissimilar. I think the people that I'm most sensitive to are when they say that they've got a full-time NHS job, say in the UK, or they're working in the public sector, and they are fairly comfortable within that, but they want to sort of learn across sectors. So they'll work in, say, sports, or they'll work moonlight in the evenings, do an evening and a weekend day at a private practice, and they wanting to sort of have a mixed sector career. It's those that sometimes come to me and say, like, I just can't seem to. That's where I've had 4 practices and 6 trying to my patients, and the patients are happy, sometimes challenging beliefs, especially if you're picking up someone else's list. But then I'm expected to comply within a model of care that doesn't suit. I really feel for them because they, it's like, go elsewhere, but it's kind of that it's a fair thing that they're wanting to do.
I think it also depends on how bad it is. If we're talking, it's just something that rubs you up the wrong way every now and again, it's a little grey area, then, at the end of the day, there is no such thing as a perfect job, right? There is always, and again,
you've not worked for me. Let's not get carried away with that statement, but it's very close to a perfect job, Adam.
But there's always going to be, something, in every job, even working for yourself, etc., where you're probably going to have to, You know, just find that middle ground. You're going to have to accept that, you know, what you want can't always be what you get.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've noticed that our time is up. I've been keeping to time for a change on this rather than waffling for hours, which is what we usually do when we have a beer together, of course. But let's wrap it up there. Where can people find you? You're a bit of a wallflower. You're not really on social media much, are you? Where do people find out more from you?
Well, funny enough, mate, I've reduced the amount of social media activity because I am growing rather weary of it. So I think I have come off social media quite a lot. But I am on all the social media platforms. So you got a disgruntled employee there, mate, by the way.
I know. Right, I thought I might provoke a revolution internally there. Yeah, perfect job, my arse. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for all your comments. It's been brilliant, and thanks for your time, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries. Pleasure.
Let's find the fancy outro, which comes on at massively high volume. Quick, turn your volume down.